They say power is knowing when not to use it. But when an arrogant HOA tries to have a sitting judge arrested on his own land, you learn that some people only understand power when it hits them in the face. My name is Judge Michael Hale, and this story begins the morning I returned to my late father's property, an old ranch tucked behind the newly built Cedar Ridge Estates. Only this time, my family's ranch wasn't a ranch anymore. It was buried under a pile of HOA rules, polished driveways, and smug neighbors who didn't even know who actually owned the land they strutted on. The air was sharp that morning, October wind, curling through the valley as I pulled up in my black SUV. The wrought iron gate that once carried my father's initials, H.R. Hale, 972, now had a shiny new sign bolted across it. Private property, Cedar Ridge HOA access only. Trespassers will be prosecuted. My jaw tightened. That sign wasn't just metal. It was a declaration. A bunch of homeowners committee members had the audacity to tell me I was trespassing on my own inheritance. I stepped out of the car, boots crunching gravel, and felt every ounce of old Hale blood boil in my veins. The fields beyond the gate were where my father taught me to ride, where my mother planted lavender that perfumed the whole valley every June. Now, I saw cookie-cutter houses, manicured lawns, and the faint echo of lawnmowers where there should have been silence and birds. A silver-haired woman in yoga pants spotted me from down the road. She was walking a poodle, sunglasses perched on her nose like she was royalty. When she saw me unlatch the gate, her lips curled. "Excuse me," she shouted, marching toward me. "You can't go in there. This is Cedar Ridge property." I looked up slowly. "I'm aware. I'm also aware it sits on top of my deed." She blinked. "Your deed? That's ridiculous. This community was established 3 years ago." I smiled. Cold, calm, the way I do in court when someone starts lying under oath. "Exactly 3 years ago," I said, "right after my father passed away." Her expression stiffened, but she didn't back off. "I'll have to report this to the HOA president. You can't just walk in here. The board doesn't allow—" "The board," I interrupted, "is about to get a lesson in property law." I walked past her through the gate, ignoring the stream of offended noises behind me. By the time I reached the barn, what was left of it, 2 men in golf carts were already pulling up, waving phones. One of them shouted, "Hey! You can't be here. This is trespassing!" I turned slowly. "Call whoever you want." They didn't hesitate. I heard one of them say, "Yeah, we've got a trespasser at Lot 12, Old Ranch area. Send the sheriff." The sheriff, good. That made it easier. 10 minutes later, a patrol car rolled up. The deputy who stepped out was young, maybe late 20s, nervous energy in every move. "Sir, we got a call about someone entering HOA property without authorization." "That would be me," I said. "Michael Hale." He frowned, scanning my license. Then his brows shot up. "Judge Hale?" I nodded. His tone immediately shifted. "Sir, sorry, I didn't. These calls come from the HOA all the time. They said you were vandalizing." I cut him off with a hand. "You're fine, deputy. Do your job. I'm just here to document a land dispute." The 2 HOA men behind him looked ready to combust. The taller one stepped forward, face red as a tomato. "This man's trespassing. He broke the gate." "The gate," I said quietly, "is installed illegally on my property. You might want to stop talking before you add defamation to your list." He blinked, confused. What?" I reached into my jacket, pulled out a folded document, and handed it to the deputy. "This is the original land deed. Hale Family Trust, filed 1972, reaffirmed 1998, and never sold." The deputy read the first few lines, then let out a low whistle. The HOA rep leaned over his shoulder, trying to peek. "That can't be right. We have ownership documents." "From who?" I asked. "A developer named Mark Fenway?" His mouth fell open. "Yeah," he said. "How did you—" I smiled grimly. "Because I signed the court order freezing Fenway's assets last year for fraudulent property acquisitions. Including this one." The deputy's eyes widened. "Wait, so this whole development built on stolen land," I finished. "And you're all about to learn what that means in a courtroom." The woman with the poodle returned, this time with a man in a polo shirt and clipboard, probably the infamous HOA president. He had that practice smirk, one I'd seen too many times on defendants who thought their connections made them untouchable. Sir, he said, extending a hand like we were equals. I'm Tom Bentley, president of the Cedar Ridge HOA. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot. I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I said, you had my father's barn bulldozed. You paved over his well. You built a subdivision on stolen land. And now you think you can sweet-talk me? His smile faltered. Now wait just a minute. No, Mr. Bentley, I said softly, stepping closer. You wait. Because from this moment on, everything you say can and will be used against you. He blinked rapidly. You can't threaten me. I'm not threatening, I said. I'm stating a fact. I am the sitting district judge for this county. And you, sir, just trespassed on judicial property. The deputy's jaw dropped. The HOA reps went pale. Tom sputtered, You can't, this is a conflict of interest. Good thing I won't be ruling on it, I said. But I'll make sure it lands on the desk of a federal investigator who will. By the time the dust settled, the HOA crowd dispersed, muttering into their phones. The deputy, bless his heart, looked caught between laughter and awe. Sir, you want me to file a report? He asked. Yes, I said. Document everything. Photos, timestamps, witnesses. I'll need it when I bring this to court. He nodded, then lowered his voice. Honestly, Judge, I've been waiting for someone to shut these people down. They've been bullying residents for years. I've heard, I said, and they just made their biggest mistake yet. That night I sat in my study, the old ranch deed spread across my desk, surrounded by legal books and dusty binders. Every line of that document carried my father's handwriting. He'd trusted people once, developers who promised to honor the land, to modernize responsibly. Instead, they'd stolen it while my mother was in hospice. And now, 3 years later, they had the nerve to call me a trespasser. I opened my laptop and began typing. Notice of legal motion to invalidate HOA property titles, Cedar Ridge Estates. Filed by Honour Michael R. Hale, landholder. Cause fraudulent conveyance, property misrepresentation, unlawful eminent domain. By midnight, I'd already emailed 3 federal agencies, 1 state investigator, and my clerk. If the HOA wanted a fight, they'd just declared war on the wrong man. The next morning, I drove back to the property, this time with a camera crew from the county recorder's office. The HOA members were out again, whispering, panicking, recording me on their phones. I ignored them and stood by the old oak tree, my father's favorite spot. I could almost hear him chuckle in the wind. You always said, Dad, never let a liar keep your land. As I packed up to leave, a black Mercedes pulled in front of me. Tom Bentley stepped out, flanked by a woman in a blazer, probably their attorney. Judge Hale, he said stiffly. Our board would like to resolve this amicably. I raised an eyebrow. Amicably? Yes, the lawyer said quickly. If we can come to a settlement. There won't be a settlement, I interrupted. Only restitution? Bentley crossed his arms. You can't just shut down a whole community. I smiled faintly. Watch me. But what I didn't know was that the HOA wasn't done. Later that evening, as I pulled into my driveway, 2 sheriff's cars were waiting. The same deputy stepped out, looking apologetic. Judge Hale, I'm really sorry, but we got another call. From who? He looked at his notepad. Cedar Ridge HOA. They're pressing charges. They want you arrested for trespassing. For a long moment, I just stared at him. Then I laughed. A slow, disbelieving laugh that made him step back. Arrest me, I said quietly. I dare them to try. They really did it. The HOA filed a complaint against me, Judge Michael Hale, claiming I trespassed, damaged community property, and intimidated residents. I've seen stupid cases before, but this was arrogance wrapped in legal suicide. The next morning, my phone buzzed before dawn. Judge Hale? It was Deputy Ross, the same young officer from the other day. His voice sounded uneasy. I got a directive from the sheriff's office. They want me to serve you with an arrest warrant. I sat up, calm as stone. Signed by who? He hesitated. Magistrate Judge Connolly. Of course. Connolly, an old colleague of mine. Good judge, but spineless when it came to public pressure. All right, I said. You do your job, Ross. Bring the warrant. But make sure you bring a body camera, too. This one's going to be memorable. 30 minutes later, blue and red lights flashed outside my gate. Ross stepped out, head low, holding a stack of papers. Behind him stood Tom Bentley, HOA president looking smug and dressed like he was going to Sunday brunch. The moment he saw me, he smirked. Well, guess the law applies to everyone after all, huh, Judge? I didn't answer him. I looked at Ross. Deputy. You have a warrant? Ross nodded, unfolding the paper. Under complaint filed by the Cedar Ridge HOA. Charges of trespassing, property interference, and disturbance of peace, Bentley added. And you'll also be liable for any emotional distress you caused my residents. Don't think your title makes you untouchable. I tilted my head. You done talking, Tom? He blinked. Excuse me? I held out my wrists. Go ahead, deputy. Let's do this properly. Ross sighed and cuffed me gently. For the record, sir, I don't agree with this. I know, I said. Just make sure your camera's rolling. The drive to the station was quiet. I stared out the window, thinking about how easily power can corrupt people who've never actually earned it. Tom Bentley thought he'd humiliate me. He didn't know he'd just handed me the biggest weapon possible, proof of malicious prosecution. At the station, the sheriff, an old friend named Dan Miller, met me at intake. Mike, what the hell is going on? He muttered. You're on my docket and suddenly I've got HOA suits telling me to lock you up? Do your job, Dan, I said calmly. Book me. Fingerprints, mugshot, all of it. He stared at me like I'd lost it. You serious? Dead serious. They want a show? Let's give them one. By noon, every HOA member had their phones out, watching from the lobby window as I was led through in cuffs. The whispers followed me like flies. That's the guy who trespassed? He's really a judge? Guess the HOA was right after all. Bentley looked like he'd won a championship. He even tried to film me as they walked me to the holding area. I leaned close enough for his phone to catch my voice. Keep recording, Tom. You'll need this when your lawyers ask why you provoked a sitting judge into gathering evidence for a federal civil suit. His smile twitched. I spent exactly 4 hours and 32 minutes in a holding cell, long enough to make sure the paperwork was processed. Then I posted bail myself. When I stepped out, the press was waiting. Someone had leaked my arrest. Cameras flashed. Microphones shoved forward. Judge Hale, is it true you were arrested for trespassing on HOA property? Do you have any comment on the Cedar Ridge community's allegations? I straightened my tie and looked right into the lenses. Yes, I said. And I look forward to proving in court that the Cedar Ridge HOA has been operating on land they do not own. Thank you. Then I got in my car and drove straight to the courthouse. The courtroom war begins. The next day I walked into County Courtroom B. Not as the judge, but as the plaintiff. That alone sent shockwaves through the building, my colleagues whispered. Clerks peeked through doors. Reporters filled the back benches. The case title read, Hale v. Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association. Allegations, fraudulent conveyance, false claims, defamation, malicious prosecution, and property theft. My attorney, Carla Monroe, was a pit bull in a suit. She'd clerked under me years ago, now one of the sharpest litigators in the state. She smirked when she saw me reviewing the HOA's flimsy filing. They actually cited community consent as ownership evidence, she said. That's not even a real legal basis. They're amateurs, I said, but amateurs with money and arrogance. Let's take both. When the judge entered, not me, thankfully and called for opening statements, Tom Bentley strutted up to the table with his attorney. Linda Crest, Your Honor, Linda began. The defendant HOA merely acted to protect its residents from an aggressive trespasser who refused to respect community boundaries. Your Honor, Carla countered, the plaintiff owns the very land those boundaries were built on. The HOA's so-called community is the trespasser. Gasps rippled through the room. Judge Connolly rubbed his temples. Let's proceed with evidence. Carla called the first witness, the county surveyor. He presented original topographic maps and land deeds dating back 50 years. Every document confirmed one thing. The Hale family never sold, transferred, or leased the property. When she finished, Carla dropped the bombshell. Your Honor, the HOA's development. Permits were approved under a fraudulent submission by a developer currently under federal investigation, Mark Fenway. Mr. Fenway listed himself as joint, owner of Hale Ranch without any recorded sale. Linda tried to object. Carla didn't even glance her way. Objection on what grounds? Connolly asked. Linda stammered. Irrelevant to. Overruled, Connolly said immediately. I sat back and watched the panic ripple across the HOA table. Tom Bentley leaned in to whisper something to his lawyer. His hands were shaking. When it was time for the defense, Bentley took the stand himself. He tried to project confidence, but his voice quivered just enough. "Mr. Bentley," Carla began, pacing slowly, "did you authorize the installation of a gate reading, 'Trespassers will be prosecuted'?" "Yes, to protect residents. Residents of property you did not legally own?" He blinked. I was told by who?" "By the developer. He said it was fine. Did you verify ownership before enforcing penalties, sending fines, or, let's see here, calling law enforcement on the actual landowner?" "Silence, Mr. Bentley," Carla pressed. He swallowed. "No." The courtroom erupted in whispers again. Then came the pièce de résistance and the body cam footage. Deputy Ross had given us his recording of the arrest. On screen, the jury watched as Tom Bentley gloated in front of the camera, smirking while I stood there handcuffed. They heard my exact words. "You'll need this when your lawyers ask why you provoked a sitting judge into gathering evidence for a federal civil suit." The judge looked up slowly from the screen. "Ms. Crest," he said to the HOA's attorney, "do you have any defense for this?" She stammered something about miscommunication and community misunderstanding. It didn't work. By the end of the day, the courtroom was a furnace of tension. Connolly finally adjourned, setting a continuation date. But the writing was already on the wall. The HOA had just dug its own grave. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed again. Tom Bentley shoved through them, shouting that he'd appeal everything. I didn't say a word. I just watched him, because I knew something he didn't. The next phase wasn't civil court. It was criminal investigation, and I'd already sent every document, the deeds, the false filings, the HOA's internal emails I'd subpoenaed, straight to the state attorney general's office. That night, I sat on my porch watching the sun bleed over the horizon. The ranch stretched wide and quiet, even with all the houses still standing for now. I could hear my father's voice in the wind again. "You're doing the right thing, son. Don't let them take it." I nodded to the emptiness. "Don't worry, Dad, I'm just getting started." But the HOA wasn't done yet. 2 days later, Carla called me, her voice tight. "They're panicking," she said. "Bentley's trying to move HOA funds offshore. They've hired a PR firm. And, get this, they filed a motion to disqualify you from owning the land because of conflict of interest as a judge." I almost laughed. "So now they're challenging the judiciary itself?" "Exactly," she said. "And they're spreading stories online that you abused power, leaked documents, and harassed residents." That part made my blood boil. I could handle insults, but I wouldn't let them twist the truth. "Let them post whatever they want," I said finally. "Because when I'm done, that HOA won't just lose their homes. They'll lose their charters." The next court date was set for Friday, 10 a.m. But what none of them knew, what I hadn't told even Carla yet, was that I'd made one final call that morning to the State Property Crimes Division. To an old friend in federal land oversight, and to a team of investigators who had been waiting for someone to crack open the Fenway fraud case wide enough to expose every rotten board and complicit HOA president in the county. This time, it wasn't just about Cedar Ridge. It was about every neighborhood that developer ever touched. As I hung up, I caught sight of the ranch again, the sun glinting off those fake private property signs. They still stood bold and shiny, marking stolen land. I smiled to myself. Not for long. Some people learn their lesson after one lawsuit. The Cedar Ridge HOA wasn't some people. They were about to find out what happens when arrogance meets federal jurisdiction. The Friday hearing was supposed to be about property clarification. At least, that's what the HOA believed. In reality, it was the calm before the storm. When I arrived at the courthouse, reporters were already circling. Every local network, every legal blog, all waiting to see a judge face off against an HOA that tried to have him arrested. But I wasn't nervous. I'd done my homework. Behind the scenes, I'd spent the last 48 hours working with the State Property Crimes Division, the Attorney General's office, and a small team from the FBI's white-collar crime unit. Their investigation into the Fenway development fraud had been cold for nearly a year, until I handed them everything: fake deeds, Forged county signatures, wire transfers, and emails that tied the Cedar Ridge HOA directly to Fenway's shell company. All they needed was timing, and timing I could give them. Inside the courtroom, the tension was suffocating. Tom Bentley sat at the defense table, his lawyer whispering frantically beside him. He ditched the smugness today and replaced by sweat and a fake smile. Across from them, my attorney Carla Monroe leaned in and murmured, "They're stalling." They filed another motion to delay. "Good," I said quietly. "That'll give our friends outside a few more minutes." She frowned. "Friends?" I only smiled. Judge Connolly entered, looking exhausted already. "Let's proceed. I trust both parties are ready?" "Ready, Your Honor," Carla said. Linda Crest, the HOA's lawyer, forced a grin. "Your Honor, before we begin, my client wishes to submit additional exhibits regarding property jurisdiction." "Denied," Connolly said instantly. "We're not here to play procedural ping-pong, Ms. Monroe. Your opening remarks." Carla stood. "Your Honor, we are prepared to present new evidence. Evidence showing not only fraudulent ownership filings but active collusion between the HOA board and a federally indicted developer." Bentley's head snapped up. "Objection," Linda blurted. "There is no proof." "Sit down, Miss Crest," Connolly said. "Let's see the evidence," Carla nodded. "With your permission, we'd like to call Special Agent James Larkin to the stand." The courtroom went dead silent. A man in a dark suit entered, badge glinting as he took the stand. "Special Agent Larkin, FBI, White Collar Crimes Division." Judge Connolly's brow furrowed. "This just escalated." "Yes, Your Honor," Carla said smoothly. "Because what began as a local land dispute is now part of a multi-million-dollar fraud investigation involving at least 5 HOAs across the county." Larkin opened a folder and began listing evidence. Forged signatures of county clerks on deed transfers, unrecorded payments from HOA accounts to shell corporations, emails between developer Mark Fenway and Tom Bentley confirming kickbacks for cooperation. By the time he finished, the entire courtroom was buzzing. Connolly looked like he'd swallowed a stone. "Mr. Bentley," he said slowly, "do you wish to respond to these allegations?" Bentley's voice cracked. "I don't know what this is." "Those emails, those could be fake?" Larkin raised a brow. "We traced the metadata. They came from your HOA account, time-stamped at 3:14 p.m., 2 days before the first construction permit was approved." Outside, faint sirens began echoing. Carla checked her watch, then gave me a knowing glance. "Right on schedule." Through the tall courtroom windows, the sound grew louder, until flashing lights appeared across the street. 3 black SUVs rolled up, followed by 2 marked FBI vehicles. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Connolly looked up, frowning. "What in God's name?" Larkin spoke calmly into his radio mic. "Operation confirmed. Proceed." Within seconds, the courtroom doors burst open and 2 agents approached the defense table. "Thomas Bentley, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit property fraud, obstruction of justice, and false filing of ownership records." The color drained from Bentley's face. "This is outrageous." "I'm a community leader." "Not anymore," I said quietly. They cuffed him right there in front of everyone. The media outside caught everything. By the time we exited the courthouse, the footage was already streaming online. Headlines exploded across news tickers. HOA president arrested in federal property fraud sting. Judge victim turns tables on corrupt HOA. I didn't celebrate. Not yet, because this wasn't just about one man. It was about the entire system that allowed these so-called community associations to bully, threaten, and exploit homeowners under the banner of rules. And I wasn't done until the system itself cracked. That night, I sat in my home office, stacks of legal documents spread across my desk. The phone rang. Carla. "They raided the HOA offices," she said. "Agents found offshore account logs, fake invoices, even blank property deeds ready to be filled out. Fenway's name is everywhere." I leaned back, exhaling slowly. "And the other HOAs?" "Under investigation," she said. "Looks like Bentley's group was just the start. Fenway used multiple HOA presidents as fronts. They got commissions for every house sold on stolen land." "Figures," I muttered. "Parasites always travel in packs." There was a pause. Then she said softly, "Mike, you did it. You took them down." I looked out at the ranch, moonlight spilling over the grass, the faint outline of the old barn foundation. "Not yet," I said. The people who bought those homes, they're victims too. They need justice. The next morning I returned to Cedar Ridge. This time there were no guards, no golf carts, no private property signs. Only yellow FBI tape wrapped around the HOA office doors. A few residents stood nearby, confused and worried. One older man approached me cautiously. "You're the judge, right? The one they said trespassed?" I nodded. He sighed. "We didn't know, sir. They told us they owned the land. We just wanted a quiet place to live. I looked at the houses, all perfect, identical, sterile. They lied to everyone," I said. "But the law will fix that. You'll get your deeds corrected." His eyes welled up. "Thank you. They kept fining us for ridiculous things. My wife planted sunflowers and they threatened eviction." I smiled faintly. "Not anymore." Later that afternoon, I met Agent Larkin at the site. His team was loading boxes of evidence into vehicles. "Hell of a mess," he said, flipping through a file. "You just opened one of the biggest HOA corruption rings we've seen in this state." "Glad to be of service," I said dryly. "Just make sure those homeowners don't lose everything because of Fenway's greed." "We'll handle it," he promised. "Property reassignment hearings will start next month. And Fenway's already in custody in Arizona." That made me pause. "You got him?" Larkin grinned. "Tried to run. Didn't get far." For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself a deep breath of satisfaction. Justice was finally catching up. But as I turned to leave, something caught my eye. A small metal plaque on one of the new homes. It read, "Dedicated to Judge Michael Hale, visionary landowner." I frowned. "Who put that there?" Larkin shrugged. "No idea. Probably a PR stunt from Bentley before the raid." I reached out and pried it off the wall. "I'm no one's mascot," I said quietly. "Just a man cleaning up his father's land." That evening I drove out past the ridgeline, where the new asphalt ended and the old dirt road began. The last rays of sunset spilled across the hills, untouched, wild, alive. For the first time in years, the valley felt like mine again, but peace never lasts long in my world. My phone buzzed. Carla again. "Mike, we've got a problem." "What kind?" "Someone filed a counterclaim. Anonymous plaintiff. They're claiming the court overstepped its authority seizing HOA assets." I sighed. "Let me guess, I'm another developer's lawyer." "No," she said. "Worse. It's a corporate group calling itself United Residential Holdings. They're saying they own every HOA Fenway managed, including Cedar Ridge." The name rang like a warning bell in my mind. "United Residential," I repeated. "That's not a local outfit." "No," she said. "They're based in D.C." I stared out into the darkness beyond the valley, the quiet whisper of wind through the fields. Of course it wasn't over. People like Fenway never worked alone, and if a corporation from D.C. was stepping in, this was about to get bigger than a stolen ranch. The thing about corruption is, it never dies quietly. You can chop off one head and two more grow back, wearing better suits and smiling smoother smiles. When United Residential Holdings stepped in, claiming ownership of every HOA Fenway built, I knew this wasn't just about stolen land anymore. This was about systemic greed, a machine so large that my father's ranch had just been a single cog in its engine, and now that machine was gunning straight for me. The new threat Carla stormed into my office, a folder clutched in her hand. "They filed in federal court, Mike, Washington jurisdiction. They're arguing that Cedar Ridge and every other HOA involved was legally acquired under a corporate development partnership. They're claiming you violated constitutional limits by influencing state-level seizures." "Influencing?" I echoed. "I filed as a citizen, not a judge." "They're twisting your title into a weapon," she said bitterly. "They want to make it look like you abuse power to win a personal case." I leaned back, eyes narrowing. "So they want to fight dirty?" "They already are," Carla said. "They've got lobbyists, PR teams, and 3 senators sending letters of concern about judicial overreach. They're turning this into politics. Then we play politics better," I said quietly. The strategy for the next 2 weeks, my house turned into a war room. Carla handled the legal prep, coordinating with the Attorney General's team. I worked my contacts, federal judges, ethics boards, land commissions, even an old law professor who now sat on the state Senate's Legal Ethics Committee. Our goal was simple: prove that United Residential Holdings was nothing but Fenway's money launderer in disguise. Late one night, Carla burst into my study holding a flash drive. Got something, she said breathlessly. Financial trails, same bank account numbers. Fenway moved funds from his shell company, Cedar Property Group, into United Residential's account 3 months before his arrest. They're one and the same. I took the drive, plugged it in, and scrolled through the evidence. Wire transfers, offshore deposits, property title conversions. It was all there. Beautiful, I said, eyes hard. Now let's bury them with their own paper trail. The federal court showdown, the courtroom in D.C. was bigger, colder, and far more hostile. Rows of corporate lawyers lined the defense table, men and women in $1,000 suits who looked at me like I was dirt on their imported shoes. Their lead counsel, Raymond Voss, was the kind of man who smiled only when he smelled blood. Judge Hale, he said mockingly during the pre-hearing handshake, how's it feel being on the other side of the gavel for once? I met his gaze evenly. About as comfortable as watching a vulture lecture a hawk about ethics. He laughed softly. Cute, but you're out of your depth here, old man. I smiled faintly. You'd be surprised how deep I can go. The proceedings began. The presiding judge, Honor Mariah Denton, was sharp and unflinching, a no-nonsense federal mind with a reputation for despising corruption. She looked over her glasses at both sides. This case has drawn national attention. I expect clean arguments and solid evidence, not theatrics. Voss smirked like that rule only applied to me. He started strong, weaving a story about development rights, economic expansion, and rogue judicial interference. According to him, United Residential was a victim of state-level chaos trying to restore order to their legally acquired assets. It was smooth, polished, completely false. Then it was Carla's turn. She didn't roar. She didn't posture. She simply walked up, inserted a USB drive, and projected a single slide onto the courtroom screen. Wire transfer records, Cedar Property Group, United Residential Holdings. Gasps echoed. Your Honor, Carla said calmly. These are transaction logs obtained from subpoenaed international banking records. The same accounts used by Mark Fenway to fund fraudulent HOA developments, now rebranded under this corporation's name. Voss's smirk faltered. Your Honor, that's circumstantial at best. Circumstantial, Carla cut in. Then explain why these transfers are dated before your client filed any acquisition documents, or why their board of directors includes Fenway's own accountant, Mr. Lionel Brooks, who's currently under federal indictment. The courtroom erupted. Judge Denton pounded her gavel. Order! Order in the court! She turned to Voss. Counselor, I suggest you explain why your client's so-called partnership looks like a front for money laundering. Voss swallowed hard. The turning point. The hearing stretched into the afternoon. Every time Voss tried to redirect, Carla countered with precision. She called Agent Larkin to testify again, confirming that United Residential had inherited all Fenway's fraudulent assets. Then came the moment that sealed everything. Carla pulled out a printed email thread, marked as Exhibit 39. It was between Fenway and a man named R. Voss. The timestamp was 6 months before Cedar Ridge broke ground. Fenway wrote, Once we get Hale Ranch under the HOA paperwork, we're untouchable. The old man's sick anyway. By the time the judge kid figures it out, we'll have sold half the lots. Voss had replied, Understood. United Residential can handle the laundering side. The room went completely still. Judge Denton's eyes narrowed. Counselor Voss, is this your email? He stammered. Your Honor, that can't... It's verified by metadata, Carla said coldly. Signed from his own firm's IP address. Voss went white. His own client stared at him in horror. Denton leaned forward. Mr. Voss, I strongly suggest you stop talking before you add perjury to your record. Bailiff seized those documents. The collapse within an hour, the entire defense unraveled. Federal agents escorted Voss out in handcuffs. United Residential's CEO requested an emergency recess that turned into a full-blown retreat. When the hearing resumed the next morning, Judge Denton's ruling was swift and merciless. All properties developed under fraudulent conveyance are to be returned to rightful landowners. The Cedar Ridge HOA is hereby dissolved. All proceeds from unlawful sales are frozen pending redistribution. Furthermore, United Residential Holdings and its officers are referred to federal prosecution for racketeering and conspiracy to defraud. She looked directly at me. Judge Hale, Though you stand here as a citizen, the court commends your restraint and your service to the integrity of the law. The system is stronger because people like you refuse to bow to corruption. I inclined my head slightly. Thank you, Your Honor. The aftermath, 2 months later, the valley was quiet again. The FBI trucks were gone. The HOA office stood empty, windows boarded up. Residents who'd been lied to now owned their homes legally, free from fines, threats, and bogus rules. One afternoon, a group of them came to my door. The same man who'd once been fined for planting sunflowers held a small box in his hands. "Judge Hale," he said, "we wanted you to have this." Inside was a brass plaque, simple and unpolished. It read, "For standing up when no one else could." I felt something tighten in my chest. Maybe pride, maybe peace, I nodded. "Thank you. But remember, this isn't about me. It's about every homeowner who ever got bullied by people hiding behind bylaws." He smiled. "Still, we're glad you fought back." Epilogue: the gavel and the gate. That evening, I returned to the ranch one last time. The old gate had been repaired, the real one, with my father's initials. H.R. Hale, 1972. I stood there in the golden light, the wind carrying the scent of lavender across the valley. It was peaceful again. Honest. Home. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small wooden gavel, one my father carved for me when I passed the bar. I set it gently on the post beside the gate. "Justice served," I whispered. Then, for the first time in years, I drove through that gate without looking back.